My name is Jason.
My name is Tom.
And this is Fear of a Black Dragon, an old school RPG podcast.
And in this episode, we are distinctly out of season as we explore the Wassailing of Claus Manor.
Our first segment is the basic crawl.
The Wassailing of Claus Manor is an 88-page Yuletide maelstrom written by Mike Martins and Michael Van Vliet, with illustrations by Brian Sago and published in 2023 by Clear Keep and Plus One EXP. From the intro. It's the dawn of the 20th century. Amid foreboding war and festering industry, the North Pole reaches a breaking point. A lavish lifestyle, generational torch passing, and the demands of an exploding world population push the inhabitants of Claus Manor to embrace dark and arcane forms of the holiday spirit. All too quickly, the manor will become the epicenter of Bedlam.
The book is essentially one of two halves. The first half is primarily focused on teaching you how to play the Wassailing of Claus Manor. This is a standalone game. So we start with the setup, which is an overview of the gameplay, which covers games that are connected to this, like Brindlewood Bay and Trophy and Bedlam Hall, principles of play, setup, and safety tools. Then we have character creation. Players are presented with a series of choices in order to fashion a member of the Claus staff for play. Next comes Holiday Spirit. This section outlines the prevention and reversal of the holiday spirit's delirious effects. Next is a chapter called Ducks. Herein you discover the use and dissolution of the game's social authority tokens. Then we have a lot of just hard gameplay sections like the roles, playing the game, running the game. On page 38, we get to Welcome to Claus Manor, which is an introduction to the actual setting of the game. Next comes a section called What We Say About. This is a really interesting section that has questions that are posed to players in order to flesh out the game world. We have the Manor's many rooms. There are a number of rooms available to explore in Claus Manor. Each comes with a detailed description and a paint the scene question. Next is the family, including Lord Santa Claus, Lady Gertrude Claus, Kringla Claus, Yolnir Claus, Dead Moroz, and Snegorochka Moroz. We have two additional characters that are explored in the following section who influence the game in different ways, and they're kind of optional for play, Pharrell and Cornelius. We have an epilogue, and then we have a note about time adjustment. This is advice for playing on a short schedule. More on that in a bit. Let's go to our bona fides. Tom.
I have read it. How about you, Jason?
I played it in a one-shot over the holidays last year with some friends, as God intended. Although I think playing it as a one-shot was a mistake for reasons I'll talk about. I think it should have been a two-shot.
Good to hear more about that.
We'll get there.
Okay.
Things we liked about the Wassailing of Claus Manor. Before we get too deep into this, I will note here, as with Butter Princess, I am a regular collaborator and employer of all the people involved in the creation of the Wassailing of Claus Manor. I, however, had nothing to do with the creation of the Wassailing of Claus Manor. And so I didn't even know it existed until it existed. So just putting that out there. But why don't we start with graphic design, visuals, presentation, artwork. What do you think of that stuff, Tom?
Yeah, so overall, I like the look and feel of it. It has the, perhaps what you'd expect, Yuletide colours, red and dark green prevail. I think there's no way around that in a Yuletide-themed Maelstrom game. But I also liked how it's not literally early 20th century typography or anything like that. That would be too hard to read, probably, for a modern audience. But it has the feel of that, and the illustrations carry that through. They look to me a little bit like, or they recall how, before press photography was a big thing, you'd often have engravings of people featured in newspaper stories. They look a little bit like that. Of course, they're considerably more artistically expressive. They are illustrations. They're not just intended to be actual reproductions of exactly what someone looks like. But they have that feeling. That's quite good. And also, it gives it really a unique ambiance to the book as you read through it. It feels a little bit historical and a little bit not, and I quite liked that about it. Yeah. What did you think?
I want to piggyback off something you just said, talking about the graphic design elements and the typefaces and fonts and that kind of thing. This is something that Mike Martins is really good at, incidentally. If you ever need to hire someone for your book to do this thing, which is Mike is really good at finding a font that is suggestive of a historical time, but clean and readable for a modern audience. Mike is really, really good at that. He's actually doing it for The Between right now, or the new edition of The Between. He's put together this really fantastic design Bible for The Between, the new edition, and all three of those books. And it's really excellent. It does this really great job of capturing this Victorian feel without being bogged down by ye olde fonts. But easy to read, it's clean, it's clear, but it's still really suggestive of the era. And I think he's done a really good job here as well in that regard. The overall style is really interesting. It is a little bit like this collage style that Mike is really into. We talked about it in Butter Princess, but sort of meets Courier and Ives. So I really quite enjoyed that. The color choices are excellent. I think the cover is particularly striking. Like, it really, really stands out. Even like in my collection of PDFs, it stands out, it kind of pops because I have like a thumbnail of all my PDFs. They did like a supplementary book for it, which I haven't yet read or looked at, but it has a similar thing. And it's almost like the green counterpoint to the red cover of this core game. Love the Manor map. Thought the Manor map was really good. Yeah, good. I do think that Butter Princess, since we have recently done that game, I do think Butter Princess is a little better, if I'm being honest. I was a little more drawn in by Butter Princess's visuals than I was on this one. And I think it's because Wassailing is maybe too clean in some places. There's a lot of pages which are striking, but they're kind of sparse. This is a very
it's interesting. I don't know. I tend to prefer if people are on the side of sparseness generally, but I do know what you mean, though. Maybe it's... I'm not going to try and psychoanalyze how it came out this way. There's any number of reasons you might make these decisions or not. But overall, I think it does give a lot of space to navigate the page each time. For example, the location write-ups, which actually is another thing I'd like to mention that I like. They have a sort of classic one-paragraph dungeon room write-up, and then next to that, in red, is the paint the scene questions for that location. So it's sort of got the best of both worlds between your old school laconic dungeon description and then your new school, let's do some acting or whatever. So I thought that worked really well, actually. That bit, certainly, I felt that's the part you're going to read most often, probably, if you're the GM. You can confirm that or not. And I think that's a really good bit of design, yeah.
Yeah. Also, we should mention the artwork, too, because there is some original art in here. It's not just public domain Christmas art. I'm pretty sure that the illustrations of the various Claus family members and of Pharrell and Cornelius, I'm pretty sure that Brian drew those. I think those are like original portraits. I don't know for sure, but I think they are. They might even be woodcuts. If I'm not mistaken, they did woodcuts.
They actually did woodcuts, so it's not just... Wow.
Yeah. Brian is like into that. He's really into old art styles and stuff. And I play games with him pretty much every week. And in his background of his Zoom call, there's always like various objects and various like craft objects and things like kind of around. Yeah. It's great. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure they did woodcut for this, but it's very striking. It's really good. It kind of goes to one of the questions I have, or kind of something I want to discuss in the questions portion. So I don't want to get into it too much here, but it sets a really particular tone, these illustrations of the characters. And so, visually, I think there's just a lot to love here. And I think it's actually, it's enough reason to even pick it up, right? I just think it's a super cool book to look at. Let's get into the actual gameplay and the meat of it here. I played this over the course of about 4 hours with a group of friends that I had over for the holidays. I don't often get to play role-playing games in person anymore, but it was the holidays, and this is a Christmas-themed game, and I think you can kind of only play it face-to-face. I'm sure there's a way to do it online, but I have not tried to figure that out. We had a really good time with it. I would say it took us a minute to get going. There's a rhythm to this. This game has a really particular rhythm to it. And it's all kind of baked into the play structure. You have your characters, you interact with one of the house members, you find out what their trouble is, you have to help them with their trouble. Yeah. You go to the room, make some die rolls. Like, it's real structured. And once you get into that flow, and once you figure out that that's what the game wants to be doing, it's very gamey in that way, and its structure. Once you kind of get into it, it's really fun. And there was a lot of laughter. There was a lot of everybody was having a good time. I do think it was a mistake to do it in a one-shot. This absolutely should have been a two-shot for reasons we'll get into in the questions. But that's just at a high level. We had a really, really good time with it, and I want to try it again.
Yeah.
I thought what we say about the place and what we say about these people is terrific. It's probably my favorite part of the text. Those questions that help you explore the setting are great. And if you are a game writer or a module writer and you are a long time listener of Fear of a Black Dragon, and you have been carefully absorbing the various things that Tom and I have recommended over the years in terms of how you can structure your module and how you can use questions in particular to elicit certain types of responses and gameplay moments at your table, this is a good one to look at for like what those questions can be. Like, here are some questions you can ask that really, really draw out the setting. And I loved it. We didn't get to do it as much as I would have liked, if I'm being honest. I think once you get going in the game, there's not a lot of space for it, weirdly. But those questions are terrific.
Yeah.
They're really
They
great.
are really good. They're sort of, they're in that mode of, basically, it's like a built-in love letter from Apocalypse World. That's the technology that's at work.
It kind of is, yeah.
And they're well written. I can see what you mean, or I can kind of imagine how it would come to be that you wouldn't get to go back to it once you start playing, because it has a very sort of screwball comedy feeling to it. And I think once you get into all the trouble, the escalating trouble things, which, by the way, I think is an excellent way to create that feeling that lots of stuff is going on all the time in this sort of upstairs, downstairs comedy of manners thing. But yeah, I think once you get into that, it's hard to stop. It's hard to take any breaks and find out anything. I know from experience, yeah.
It's just such a structured game.
Yeah.
Once you get into that and resolving the structure and doing all the things you're meant to be doing, that stuff gets pushed out a little bit. That's why I kind of keep going back to this idea of I would have loved to have played in 2 sessions. I think 2 sessions
right, because then you've got
really
that built-in break, and you can essentially have 2 shots at it, maybe more.
Like, I can even imagine as an opening scene of the second session, just doing more of those questions. Yeah. You could even see it drawn out to like a 3rd session, really, really getting deep with it. But yeah, I love that. My second favorite part of the text is definitely the room descriptions. These rooms are great. Each room is like so well realized. It does this thing that I adore and I do in my own game writing, which is you basically just give 3 really sharp, good details that get you 50% of the way into like what this room looks like. And then the paint the scene question comes in and rounds it out. And in play, indeed, that's how it went. And I would say that the part of the game that my play group, it was mixed levels of familiarity with role-playing games. And to a person, their favorite part, apart from just like the zaniness of the scenes, their favorite part was the exploring the house and learning more about the rooms and doing the paint scene questions.
And then this kind of... weirdly, the thing that this is most like in some ways is Power Behind the Throne from Warhammer. Like, there's sort of a court crawl with these different personalities, and it's very easy in that kind of game for the physical location to sort of feel very wishy-washy, you know, like they're just interchangeable.
Yes.
But here I really felt that you're creating a proper sense of place, and the map being there as well. It does matter where things physically are, which I think is good as well, because at its core, this is that idea of, but what if you were playing the creatures that live in the dungeon, and that's kind of what you're doing here. And I think in order for that to work, my impression is at least that as you go along playing this, and again, another reason to do maybe more than one session, is there's that pleasure of, like, you know, when you're playing Traveller, and after a while you start to really feel like a crew, and like maybe you could fly a spaceship together if you really had to one day. And here it feels like you're going to gradually get better at finding your way around the house, knowing how to deal with problems and trading off different responsibilities. And I think it's important then for the physical locations to feel like they are different from each other. Nothing.
The sense of place, in a situation as you've described, is really important, because in a typical fantasy game, or any game really, where you're not confined to one location, the glue that kind of holds it all together in some sense is your party dynamic. Our history, our dynamic. At the end of the day, it's what we're all kind of anchored to, right? It's what we're all sort of like attached to session. But in something like where you play the denizens of the dungeon, like in this, or you are playing a social kind of situation, a court crawl, like something like that, something where like we're all kind of in one place and that's where the game takes place, or like a game that's like Dance of the Damned, for example, where the manor is so important. You really have to have a strong sense of place, because that is kind of the thing that is literally anchoring your characters, but also it just takes on like more importance in the story. And so you need to have like a really good, like fleshed out sense of it. One of the things that I find really frustrating about role-playing games writ large and in the way we play role-playing games is we often forget about place. Like you suggested, sometimes it just sort of fades into the background. We're in this like really cool location and we maybe we read the box text in the beginning if there is such a thing, or maybe we say at a high level what we're seeing, but then we kind of just forget about the space and we're focused on combat and we're focused on stats and we're focused on our powers and we're focused on all those sorts of things. And I love it when a game text like takes the time to really help you as a table keep place really forefront in that. What did you think about these characters, Claus and Gertrude Claus and all of them? What were your thoughts there?
I surprisingly liked them in that
Why do you say surprisingly?
Well, because I normally have very little patience with or interest in kind of festively themed adventures, right? It's always this,
Tom the Grinch.
It's not that. It's like, in principle, like I would love for myself to just see a D&D adventure that's Christmas themed and want to play it, but it's always just kind of, oh no, orcs are attacking the North Pole, and I think I don't care about this. But here they've done something really interesting and I do want to play it, because they've taken the idea of what do you do in a Christmas themed adventure, and they've decided to go something just a completely different genre with this sort of the rogues gallery of the family, like, you know, borderline Gormenghast territory. Like, here's the noble family that lives in this crumbling manor or what have you, and it has that whole what's the novel I'm trying to remember? Between the Wars, Stately Home, Anthony Hopkins, help me out here.
Remains of the Day.
There we go, that kind of thing, and that's what they've done, and I think that's just fabulous. And the characters, they are. I don't know if you could match them exactly to particular characters in novels or films, but they feel right. The patriarch, the one who wants to shake things up, and they've all got their different. They feel right. They don't feel realistic, because this isn't what that plan is. It's not meant to be a realistic set of complex characters with thoughts and feelings, but rather more like these sort of stagey, dramatic archetypes, which I think is great.
They totally are. Yeah, you've got all the classic characters, like you said. You've got the patriarch, you've got the scheming power behind the throne character, you've got the upstart young heir, you've got the feral cousin who is technically legally entitled to some of this. But their dad was a lawyer, for shock. That whole upstairs, downstairs thing. Oh, you've even got like the beloved elder character in General, whatever his name is, Marotz. So yeah, it's really, really good in that way. It definitely captures, in its Wassailing of Claus Manor way, it captures all those classic, the upstairs part of the upstairs, downstairs genre, which I thought was really terrific. I like how they're written. I'm a little more unsure about the various tasks connected to each character. It's mostly down to the tone of the things you have to do, and I'm going to talk about that more in the expert delve. So we'll put a pin in it for now. But in terms of like their place in the story and the way they emulate the upstairs downstairs genre, and also just the way they're written on the page, I think they're all really, really terrific. Helped a lot by that artwork as well. Why don't we go to questions we had? We have a couple. I think they're pretty connected.
In a way, you've answered some of my question, but I should put it to you more fully, which is that basically what happened in your game, because this is a very sandboxy game and much of it is contained in the random card draws and the agendas of the NPCs. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to predict how it's going to come out. So how does it come out in your experience?
This is a challenging question to answer for a couple of different reasons I'll get into. One, as I've noted a couple of times, I think it was a mistake to play it in a single one-shot. There is some advice in the back of the book about ways to trim it down to make it fit into a shorter time period. But even with the trims that I made, it was a really, really tight experience. I never felt like we had quite enough time to do everything the game wants to do. So that was one thing. That said, I do think a second session, especially after the players have gotten into the groove of it, that second session is going to sing. It's going to be really, really good, because you spend a good portion of the first session figuring things out. That is not helped by an aspect that is probably kind of personal to me, which is I was the developer or co-developer of most of the things that are underpinning this game. And I have a really particular viewpoint and intuitive understanding of how, say, Trophy works, or how Brindlewood Bay works, or how some of the various mechanics and concepts that are in the game, the principles, work. And I kind of realized a little too late in my prep that this is something different.
Yeah, I can see that.
This is a different beast. Even though it uses a lot of the trappings of Trophy, for example, it just renames a lot of stuff, but it's a lot of the trappings of Trophy. If you are very, very familiar with Trophy, I think that you need to give yourself extra time to understand what Wassailing is doing, because it's a different game. And that's important to note. Even though it's clearly taken inspiration in its mechanics and ideas from other games, it is its own thing. And so that's really important. And so I was probably like engineered in a lab to be the exact wrong person to try to run this.
Because the structure of it is much more diffuse than a Trophy incursion. Do you know what I mean?
Kind of. Yeah, I would actually say we had like kind of a different problem. I found that there wasn't as much space for the role play as I wanted. You spend so much time figuring out the troubles of the various characters and how you're going to tackle them and doing the roles and responding to the roles. And that's very fun. Describing all that's very fun. There's not a lot of room left, for example, for those like really cool questions that are in the beginning. There's also not a lot of space for role play.
Yeah,
I found.
The PCs don't get to hang out together much, I guess, because they're all
not much.
The
didn't feel like
mechanics
it. Yeah.
kind of assign a task to an individual, don't they? So unless you deliberately call someone in to help you, you're not really going to be doing it together that much, are you?
Right. There were a couple of times when I was playing it where I had a couple of players who were really into roleplay and improv and stuff, and they would want to like go really deep in the scene and do a lot of roleplay, and that's great. I love that. That's really, really fun. But I was like looking at the clock.
We've got to be getting on with
right?
this.
I was like, we got to move on, kids. So the game has that issue. I do think that there's it's a combination of things. I had like an expectation that was incorrect and I did not give myself enough time to prepare. That's why I say I want to run it again, because I want to run it, first of all, in 2 sessions and maybe even 3. I could see 3 sessions on this easy, because they say 7 hours is how long it takes. I still think that's tight to do the whole thing, especially if you want to include some of the optional rules. I think you could get it to 3 sessions, but 2 would be much more comfortable. And then also, I just want to try it again because I now know what to expect a little better.
Yeah.
That was a big part of it for me. I had a question, which was, is it just me? Or are some of the things in this book presented in the wrong order? Did you have that feeling?
Yes. Yes, I did.
Okay, I'm glad it wasn't just me. To their credit-ish, they do say, skip ahead to this page to like learn about Claus Manor or whatever,
it's
right?
Classic. If you played this kind of game before, skip to this bit. If you've done this, and different options. But yeah, what I found there was that there was no option that was actually designed to be just keep reading. They just sort of go, oh, you could just keep reading. And I'm like, well, who's that for in that case? And then, well, a bit of a weird one.
I read it straight through.
Yeah, I read it straight through as well. I never follow instructions like that.
I'm literally 38 pages in, and I don't really know what the game is about.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And that was an issue.
And honestly, I think it might be as simple as just flipping the order of the 2 halves, put all the
it might be
adventure stuff first.
Or kind of moving some parts around a little bit. Yeah, I should not have had to get that deep into the book to figure out what the game is actually about. Right? So that was an issue for me. I'm glad you picked up on it, because I was like, is this just me? I don't know.
No, of course, it is possible that if we'd followed the instructions for our category and skipped to the right pages, then maybe it would have been fine, but I didn't do that. So,
Yeah, I didn't do that either. I don't know. I would have just ordered some of the stuff a little differently.
True, and it is always difficult to know how to present these things, You don't want to be referring too early to certain concepts or too late. It is tricky. For me, this didn't work too well.
You could tell they were aware of that tension, because they even mentioned it a couple times. Yeah. We're going to mention a couple of concepts that are going to be handled a little bit later. When you're talking about that in your text, that's how you know you need to go back and figure out a different way to order this stuff.
Well,
In the grand scheme of things, it's kind of minor, because you will eventually read it all.
Well, that's the other thing. It's a short book. It's not like, because I've seen that issue in things that are 300 pages long, and that is a problem. Whereas
that's a real problem. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay. Let's go to the chain lightning round. Tom.
Snegorochka said she will freeze and fix everything, but not until she's experienced an 8-on-8 snowball fight in the attic.
Of the entryway location, a great evergreen tree dripping with glittery tassels hangs upside down from the ceiling. Flickering candles gutter when the front doors opened, but don't blow out. By the door, a shoe scraper shaped like a snarling wolf, its teeth positioned to scrape mud and snow off your boots. I also love the paint the scene question. What strange creature can sometimes be spotted perched in the branches of the inverted tree, glaring down at visitors?
As many little lads aspire to be, Yolnir is precocious and occasionally rude.
Snegorochka, once again, is a true regal beauty. The sight of her takes one's breath away and fills the lungs with a short-lived rime of frost. During that bewitching moment, one might sense that Snegu can see clearly all of one's faults and shatter them with a single breath. One would not be wrong, but like all members of this family, she has a generous, if frigid, heart.
In the reindeer stable we read that one reindeer, a runt with an inflamed snout, quivers in quarantine.
The gallery. A hushed room with empty frames lining every wall. The wallpaper is mustard yellow, with black fawns capering between silhouettes of trees. Only one painting remains in place, a portrait of Lord Santa Claus, shirtless and reclining, drinking from a wineskin with grape leaves in his hair, in the style of Bacchus, god of wine and revelry. Let's go to the expert delve. Hey listeners, Jason here. I want to let you know about a brand new show. It's called the Gauntlet Podcast Second Edition, and it's an exploration and celebration of the indie tabletop RPG scene. The show is called Second Edition because it's a reboot of the old Gauntlet podcast, but also because in this new format, my co-host Wes and I are looking back at a classic indie RPG and then talking about what we would do if we were making a second edition of that game. As of this recording, we've already covered Dance of the Damned, The Sword, the Crown, and the Unspeakable Power, and Dogs in the Vineyard, and we have plenty more in the pipeline. Wes and I will also be chatting with folks both in and outside the Gauntlet community about different gaming-related topics, such as fandom in TTRPGs, the effects of the Satanic Panic in the early 80s and 90s, genre in games, and much more. The Gauntlet Podcast Second Edition is a Patreon exclusive. We've created this show for the ride or die Gauntlet fans who support everything we do on Patreon. There will be a new episode in the Patreon feed every single week, and you can get exclusive access by making a $2 or higher pledge. We're at patreon.com/gauntlet. Thanks. It's the Expert Delve, and we have not come up with a precise title for this Expert Delve, but our informal title is going to be in which Jason gripes a lot about tone. So
that's not the exact wording we used off mic, but sure, yeah.
It was not the exact wording we used off mic. Here's the thing. My biggest issue with Wassailing of Claus Manor, which I had a great time with and I loved, and there's a lot of really awesome things about it, and in many, many places, particularly the characters and locations, the text is great. I had an issue with this game's tone, mostly in that I didn't understand what it was meant to be. I had a similar issue with Butter Princess. If you recall, I found like there was a bit of a disjointed thing between the art and the activities of the story. And I kind of felt something similar here. I ultimately landed on this is meant to be like zany, maybe, I guess. It's meant to be a little like kind of gonzo and capery or something, but I'm not sure the artwork fits that. And there's a lot of times where the language used in the writing, it didn't quite work for me. There were times when I really was reading this and I wanted this to be this darker thing, this thing that was more, well, it was more like Santa Claus's Bacchus. Yeah. That almost has an alien horror, mythic quality to it or something, right? And then other times there's like anachronistic language being used. The labels of some of the techniques and the terms, the game terms were a little like jarring. So it wasn't like a deal breaker by any stretch. But as I was reading it, I kept having this just like really confused feeling of, I don't know how I'm meant to present this as the GM. It's one thing to read this and okay, there's like a little jokey language here and there, or there's like some kind of things happening that don't fit with each other, like tonally. It's like, okay, that's one thing. And maybe you get past that and you kind of make it your own thing. But by the time I was done reading this, I was not totally sure as the GM how I was meant to be conveying it at the table. And that was kind of an issue for me. I wanted to talk about tone. You haven't run it yet, Tom, but I'm curious, like, am I being unfair here? It sounds like you gelled with it more than I did.
I did maybe a little bit more, and maybe that's just because I think I lucked into getting what they were getting at quite early. This
Yeah.
sort of, as I've mentioned, the upstairs downstairs comedy, which I mean literally was the name of a sitcom that was on UK TV when I was a kid, which is about the interactions between servants and their masters, and I think Jeeves and Wooster, or presumably Downton Abbey, which I've never seen,
Sure.
but it's not a comedy, but it's still that kind of thing.
It has some very light comedic elements. Yeah.
But I think I did pick up on that a bit, because if you listen to that Chain Lightning round, there's a real tension between these sort of grand, mythic, slightly horrifying, serious bits, and then the jocular elements as well. And those things can work together reasonably well. I did find I wasn't sure, and that's just my opinion, that it's the screwball horror comedy almost is the intention, but that's my assumption, and I'm not sure. And the reason I'm not sure is because it would be good if they just told us, for one thing. But it's difficult, and the issue is actually not so much when you're reading it, but when you have the interface between the GM and, as you say, presenting it to the players. One reason I've never been able to handle the game Tunnels and Trolls, for example, is the stupid jokey ability in spell names or whatever it is, which are not intrinsically bad, but every time I've been thinking of using it, it's for something quite gritty or serious, low fantasy thing, and then apparently I'm meant to hand a wizarded character sheet with spell names like sort of kapow or get out of here or whatever they're called. I just hate it.
That kills me. I hate it. Yeah, this wasn't anything like that.
We're nowhere in that.
Totally clear and fair. We're nowhere in that territory. But there were a couple times, for instance, a thing I did not love was in one of the rules explanations when it talks about if you win the roll, the subheading is winner winner, which you automatically think chicken dinner, right? And it's just oh man, help me out here. This is not good. Yeah, there's a lot of little things like that, especially in that first half of the book. The second half of the book seems to sort of find its footing more tonally, I think. But then you get to the troubles. And I thought the troubles were, I was never quite sure, is this meant to be a dark, mythic satire in a sense? Or is it meant to be just this kind of comedy of manners, right? I wasn't sure. Anyway, tone. So tone is the topic.
Tone. And then the thing here is that I think, although each of the things that we're going to talk about are quite minor and seemingly trivial, but it all adds up to a bigger whole to create the tone that you have in your game.
Yeah, I agree completely. I will note also here that as I'm looking through my notes, I'm not sure there's a way for me to continue with this conversation without sounding like an officious prick. I've come to terms with it. And
why would we still worrying about that now?
Okay, very good, very good. Okay, you're right, Tom. They add up. Here's the thing. I'm focusing on the text mostly. When the tone of a text is good, you might notice it or you might not notice it. A text with a neutral tone is kind of intentionally unnoticeable. You're meant to just be locked in on the procedures or whatever, right? So you're not thinking about tone. But if you're playing something what's that one fairy tale thing we did, Winter's Daughter, I think? Or if you're playing, something that has more of a vibe, and the text matches that vibe, it gives you a dark vibe, a fairy tale vibe, whatever it is you're going for. You do notice it, and you're oh, I really love what is happening here. I feel really drawn into this setting. So you might notice it, you might not notice it when it's good. When it's bad, you will definitely notice it, and it's jarring, and it kicks you right out. On some level, it's what's the problem? You get through it. Maybe it's even enjoyable to read, even though it's tonally inconsistent, and you play your game. Well, maybe there's not a problem for you. There's a problem for me. I don't feel like I'm being set up for success as the GM when the tone of the book is off. To me, a tone, especially that is really jokey, it kind of conveys, intentionally or not, that maybe you as the game writer find the whole exercise to be quite silly, and that maybe you'd rather be writing something else, or that you're just not taking it very seriously. And that's maybe not a fair assessment of every person who uses a jokey tone in their text, but it is inevitably how I, at least, interpret what's happening on the page. I have not ever played Tunnels and Trolls, and so I was not aware of this jokey spell thing. I would put that book down and never look at it again. I'd be out. That's my feeling on it.
No, I get
it. You're doing so much work to convey to the game facilitator, this is what the game is about. Here are the rules. Here's the characters. Here's the setting. Here's all these things I want you to know. But on this one point, the way I've presented the text, I'm going to do it in a way that is alienating and jarring. It doesn't make any sense. Do the whole thing.
Yeah. You do want to feel like people are invested in what they're doing. I have seen comical text work. Paranoia has jokes in it, but that's the point, right?
That fits.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer is written in this sort of vaguely 90s irony style. again, that's the point. It's to evoke the feeling of the TV show. So yeah, it can work. But I know what you mean. There's these sort of the real little quips. The I'd rather be doing something else feeling is kind of starts to eat away at the credibility of the whole exercise. And that's not good because, when you're writing any text, but especially an RPG scenario module, whatever you want to call it, what you're doing at every point is you're kind of psychologically priming the GM with the atmosphere, all the ingredients of your scenario and what it's going to feel like. And they will pass that on to the players. So when you're priming the GM, if it's your own notes, it's you're priming yourself. And and everything you do that kind of detracts from that, whether that's being inconsistent or just being consistently kind of in the wrong tone for what you really want to achieve, it's kind of, the percentage points of how well this is working are constantly ticking down with every paragraph, basically. That's why it's important.
It's particularly dangerous with a jokey tone. I think anachronistic language or language that jars with the era of the game, it just takes me right out of it. I mean, right out of it. Okay, I think there's something to be said for authorial voice, and I want to create space for that in this tone discussion. I'm going to offer up the works of Grant Howitt, for example. Grant writes most of his games, not all of them, but most of his games are clearly written by Grant Howitt, right? Like, you can tell, no matter what the subject matter of the game is, you know that Grant is writing it. He has a really, really distinct voice, and it is a funny voice. It works because, one, he's a really good writer. He's actually funny. And he has a lot of credibility in this way. He can write in a particular voice, a jokey voice, because he is good at it. Like, he's good. And that's a big part of it. If you're going to write something funny, it better actually be funny. I better actually laugh. If you tell a quote unquote funny joke that's not funny, and it's just like crass or stupid, you've completely missed the point. And so I do want to leave space for voice there. And I don't even mean just in terms of funny, like humor either. There's a lot of writers out there who just have a really particular established style. It's consistent in their writing, and they still are able to convey all the things they want to convey. And that's a different thing. Vincent Baker's another great example of this. He's a chameleon when it comes to voice, but it's a good example of how you can use voice in a really effective way. There is space for authorial voice to sort of override the setting or override whatever the tone is implied by what game you're playing. I think these are rare instances. And I think unless you feel really confident in your ability to express yourself in this way, you should stick to something more neutral, or you should try to intentionally get rid of the anachronisms, get rid of the jokes, and conform your text more to what the setting is of the game. Anyway, I feel like such a jerk right now, but I don't care. This is just, I feel very strongly about it. I don't know, I just do. A little cul-de-sac for graphic design and stuff. I've been focusing on text. That's my bête noire here. Obviously, graphics and art have a role to play in the tone discussion. I'm going to suggest that Morkborg is highly successful, mostly down to its visual style. Maybe that's not totally fair. I've not really played the game, so I can't speak to that too much. But I do know that the thing that captures your eye initially about Morkborg is the look.
Absolutely. I ran Cyborg recently, and I brought a tablet just to show everyone all the pictures while I was going through it. And it was unfortunate that I couldn't constantly be showing them all the illustrations all the time because it worked really well. As soon as they saw even the cover, the players went, "Oh, wow." And you're flicking through this kind of crazy neon-drenched, hyper-stylized work of art. And it is important, and it's not denigrating Morkborg to say that it is successful because of its layout and its design and its artwork, because again, we're talking about priming your own mind. When you're a player looking at that stuff, it's activating your imagination. You're kind of all drawn mentally towards the same shared visual kind of space, the same kind of feelings. And so that's half of what you're doing when you're playing a role-playing game, is trying to imagine the same things similarly. And Morkborg does it incredibly well. And that is the strength. It's not... The system is pretty good, I think, but that's not I think if you publish this as a Word document, it wouldn't be flying off the shelves,
No one would care, And it's not just the beauty of it, right? It is the tone. I want to stay really focused on tone here, right? When you look at Morkborg's visual design, you are thinking death, you're thinking black metal, you're thinking the apocalypse, you're thinking the end of the world, you're thinking of nasty, gnarly ass skeletons, you're thinking of heavy metal album covers, you're thinking of a particular, you are instantly put into the vibe. And so whenever I've run a Morkborg module, mind you, in Trophy, but whenever I've run one, and I've run a bunch, I know when I sit down how to convey it, in part because I have been prepared by the visuals of these modules and this style that Johan created. I'm in it. Like, I know how to do it. I almost feel like sheepish or weird when I want to do something funny. Like, in a certain sense, like the graphic design is policing me a little bit, right? Like, because it's like, oh man, I want to make a joke here. Maybe we're having fun. I'll make the joke. Fuck it. But I always think, you know what? I got to make sure I bring it back to this dark place, because that's what Morkborg wants to be doing, you know? Mothership's the same thing, right? It's not that the art is good in an objective sense, though it often is. It's a vibe. That is what Mothership and Morkborg, even OSE, it's a different vibe, but they're conveying a particular feeling in the visual design. And that vibe, that feeling, that's the tone.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
Like,
and if I can bring in something we have discussed on an episode many moons ago, I think, which is the Kuleshov effect. Do you remember this? It's like a film editing thing.
Oh yeah, that's the Soviet.
Exactly. The Soviet guy Kuleshov. He showed as an experiment.
It's our most popular episode, by the way.
Yeah. Good to know.
Biggest number of downloads.
Oh, and I guess maybe I don't need to rehearse this now. No, I'll mention it briefly. So basically, Kuleshov did an experiment where he showed people footage of a very famous actor of the time. The next shot would be him looking at something and expressing some kind of emotion, and then the next shot would be, in one case, it was an adorable baby, and then the next version was you see the actor, and then it's followed by a shot of a delicious bowl of soup. And then the other object was, I think, a corpse in a coffin. And the response was always that, oh, wow, this guy's such a great actor. Look how he conveys feeling love for the baby, feeling hungry when he looks at the soup, or feeling sad when he looks at the coffin. And, of course, the sting in the tail is that it was the same footage of the actor every time. And it's the association between two disparate images or two things that creates associations in our minds. And what I'm getting at with this is, when you run something in Mothership and people look at the character sheet on the app or whatever, you could run the exact same adventure in, let's say Morkborg, right? You could be running the same dungeon, and the feeling will be different, and people will act differently, because in one thing, they're a science officer on a ship that's trying to pay off their mortgage to the space cartel, and in the other version of this dungeon, they're a heavy metal death warrior who's got a skeleton for a hand. Yeah. And it does affect how you play and how you experience the game. I think that works especially with illustrations and design, but it also works with language, as we are discussing, and the way you say things.
Indeed, it does. I don't want to leave OSC because I think there's an interesting opposite end of the spectrum example there when we're talking about OSR stuff. Everything you said is correct. The visuals, it doesn't just apply to evoke like grim, dark, or heavy metal or horror thing. OSC, the way they use visual design, it creates this tone of really, honestly, like happiness.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
It's restrained, but
it's fun.
It's nice. It's not going to upset you, kind of feeling, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, and you're put in the mind of adventure, and you're put in the mind of nostalgia, and you're put in the mind of we're the kids in Hawkins sitting around playing D&D, and the Stranger Things kids, and they convey that visually. So, and to me, it's an issue of tone. It all kind of connects. I have not read a lot of the rule sets for those games, only the modules for those games. Sure. And I find generally that the visual language of them, I think it also affects how the writers write for them. And ultimately, for people like me, it affects how we run them. And so I just think it's so important. Now, I do want to go on to the less complaining and more...
let's try and solve this problem instead of just...
more like practical thoughts. Yeah. So here's the thing. I have an approach to this that I apply to both how I write a game and how I run a game. Essentially boils down to like the distinctions between sort of in-character experiences and out-of-character experiences, or at the table or above the table. I hate above the table as a term, but people use it, so it's fine. What do we mean
by above the table? Is that...
It's out of character. Okay. Whenever you're going to say something that's not in character, you're quote-unquote above the table. I've run into this a lot because I've been doing APs with people who are not in my normal play culture, and they use it a lot, so it's a thing like in D&D culture. But anyway, it's the same thing. It means out of character. I have an approach here that is in character versus out of character, and I think it's good here. First of all, I do think that, especially as a game runner and a game player, this is a muscle you should develop, switching between in-character table discussion and out-of-character table discussion, or sort of in-fiction discussion and out-of-fiction discussion. I think it's going to help you so much just in all of your role-playing game stuff. This is my soapbox, right? I've been on it for 10 years now. In character versus out of character is really important. And it's really helpful for this tone discussion. Here's the thing. When I'm writing a game, I speak to the players reading the book differently than when I speak to the keeper. I change the way I speak. I change my voice. When I'm talking to players, when I'm talking about hard mechanics, it's very neutral. It's not super expressive. It's very just let me deliver information to you that you need, and that's it. When I am speaking to keepers in those chapters of my books, it's different. I have a different approach. I write differently. It's more casual. And I think that there's something there. If you're writing a game book or a module or an adventure or something like that, I think there's a way that you can tone switch, as it were, depending upon what part of the book you're working on to convey information differently. I think that's okay. I think that's what they were doing with Wassailing of Claus Manor, because the first part of the book sounds one way and the second part of the book sounds a different way. And I appreciate that division. I get what they were doing. But I do think that there's a way that you can kind of have your cake and eat it too when it comes to this kind of thing. And so it's something to think about. But there's also like an application at the game table. When I am in character, when we are talking about scenes, when we are role-playing, when we are like in it, I literally speak differently than when we're not. My tone of voice is different. I use different language. I am a different person. Like, in a certain sense, as the GM, I am like my own character.
Yeah. You take on a kind of narrator persona, don't you? You sort of step into a different kind of mode of speaking. Yeah.
And that is where you can put the tone, right? And so if the book has prepared you properly, that's where you put all that. But you can't do that forever, right? You can't always be the storyteller.
Yeah, well, you can't do it like when you're discussing the results of a dice roll. Kind of, you're not going to be sort of.
That's exactly.
It is a windswept night, and I see that you have rolled a 12, which
you have rolled a 12. Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like it doesn't work, right? So, like Tom said, when you go to the hard mechanics, or when you have to have an out of character discussion, it's different. You talk about things differently, and I really think that this is a great way of developing your play culture at your table, because what you're going to end up getting is you're going to train your players as well to know when to dive in and when to dive out, when to maintain tone and when it's okay to break tone a little bit, when to be really serious and in it and when to have a laugh. And this is so good. That's why I say it's a muscle you really need to develop, because it's just going to make your overall experience so much better. And when we talk about tone, that sort of in character part is where you put it.
Yes, that's where it goes. That's where it should be. Yeah.
That's where it goes. Exactly. So that's my thing. Also, and this is kind of a side thing, I think that this is a good way of thinking about it. If you are the kind of person who's a little embarrassed by the expressive or performative aspects of maintaining tone, if you are a little embarrassed about being the storyteller or talking in character or using ye olde language. Like, if you're a little embarrassed by that, this division of in character and out of character actually creates like a really nice permission structure for it. The table knows when we're diving in character, when we're going in fiction, that I'm going to be a certain way, and they expect it.
Yeah.
They expect the Jason Cordova TM weird mouth noises and bizarre shit and dark overwrought language. They expect that. And then we're out of character, it's not that. And so if you have some embarrassment or nervousness about being that type of GM and maintaining the tone that your game might require, having that division is like a good place. Again, it's a good place to put it.
Yeah.
It's a permission structure to say, okay, everyone knows that this is the time for this, and so it's okay if I do it. You know?
Yeah, exactly. This is a period where you don't need to worry about coming across as a little bit dorky or something, because we're all going to be doing it. So
exactly, because we're all in character and we're all doing it. And again, that all goes to tone, because it circles all the way back to this thing I was saying about the text, which is I want to understand that you as the game writer are taking this seriously. Like, I want to know that you believe in it and that you are serious about it and that you are okay with conveying things to me in the way that it wants to be conveyed, right? And so, yeah, it's all like interconnected thoughts and ideas to me, and I'm a big I'm very serious about it. I feel.
I'm picking that up. So. Yeah. If I could add just one thing, I do have one what I think is a useful tip. And it occurred to me that I don't think I've ever really seen anyone else talking about this, but it's something I do in my own writing for games or for scenarios, either for publication or not. And that is the power of slogans for tone is something I kind of find very useful. And weirdly, I guess this isn't really an in or out of character thing. So to give you an example, like my game Road Racers, which is about well, don't tell them, but it's about the Isle of Man TT motorcycle races, but it's not licensed. So anyway, but it just has an opening line on sort of page 1 or 2 that just says, "Imagine being so good at something that you'd stake your life on it." It doesn't affect the mechanics. It has no rules weight. Probably no one's ever going to say it at the table. But that, I think, is the core thing to think about, or is when, in my case, writing the game, and then when you come to play it as well.
I also want to give you a shout here for Melandros, because you had a really interesting challenge in Melandros, which is, for people who don't know, that's Tom's game about folks living in it's Rio, right?
Yeah, Rio de Janeiro.
Like around the early 20th century?
Yeah, end of 19th, yeah, early 20th, yeah.
Yeah. But it's very grounded in the real world. There are not really any fantastical elements. It's all very real world drama. It's drama system game-ish, PBTA-ish. I know you don't claim that. But you had a really interesting challenge in Melandros, because I think whenever you're doing something that is grounded in reality, you have an extra big responsibility on the tone front, right?
Yes.
Like, you have even more work to do, I fear, because you need people to buy into this concept and this premise. And if there's not vampires and shit for them to grab onto, you've got to be able to convey with a certain amount of like a deft touch and gravity and seriousness, but also with like a certain amount of accessibility. Like it's difficult to do. And I think you did a great job.
Thank you. It's very kind of you.
It's a pleasant book to just read on its own. And I think it's in big part because the writing, you understood the assignment.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff that we've talked about on this episode is something I spent a lot of time thinking about, especially in Melandros. So that talking about fonts and like things that look a bit Victorian but aren't because it's too hard to read.
That's another thing too, the visuals. Yeah.
There's even a thing I don't think I've ever really talked about in public before, where the layout had a grid. This might be too technical publisher talk, but in order to convey the underlying theme of malandragem, which is sort of sidestepping the rules as the characters are expected to do in the game, there are points where the grid is deliberately broken, basically. I deliberately started to degrade the layout rules in order to... Anyway, all that kind of thing. And then also the other thing, the big cheat in there, is that all the artwork, a whole lot of that stuff, not from the 19th century, not from Brazil. Like, I don't think a good day guy ever went to Brazil, but I borrowed one of his papers. But as long as it fit the tone, I was happy to have it.
It works. Yeah, it fits the tone.
And as long as it wasn't obviously anachronistic, I would put it in. And that, it did work out pretty well.
But it maintained the vibes.
Exactly.
That's
It's
the
all
important
about
thing,
the
right?
vibe.
The tone and the vibes were maintained, and that was the key. Yeah. I think you knocked it out of the park. Sorry, you were making...
What was I doing? Slogans, yeah. So this is part of my kind of writing process sometimes, and sometimes I leave it in. So to give maybe a more salient example, I wrote ages ago a Cthulhu Dark scenario that's set in Northern Ireland in the 70s, and there's one bit that I had in the document from the very start, which is just big letters on one page, the phrase, "all of that blood, it had to go somewhere," and that's sort of alluding to the hidden horror that's like near the village and all this kind of thing. But I remember though that my publishing partner Josh read that and he was baffled and annoyed by it. He was like, "What is this? Is this is it going to be like some graffiti they see? Is it something for the GM?" And I was like, "To be honest, mate, I don't really know. These are all great questions. I think it's just a thing to look at and hold within yourself."
You know who's good at this? Zedek.
Yes,
He's really good at this.
That's true.
Text maintaining tone thing. So good. Anyway, what? I think we're done.
Yeah. we're at it.
I think we're done here. Let's go to the companion adventures. It's the companion adventures. We both have some story game classics on here.
Yeah, we
Go ahead,
did,
hit me with one.
All right. It's Paul Sager's My Life with Master.
Love it.
If you play
Top 5
only
game.
one story game from the Forge, or read it, this one. And it's a similar theme. It's servants of horrific masters going about their tasks, trying to... Is it fear and love are the two main stats? Oh, self-loathing. Self-loathing,
Self-loathing,
isn't it? Yeah. And great, terrific game. And it's sort of in the ballpark of Claus Manor. You know what I mean? Like, I think you could do a Santa Claus.
Oh,
My Life with
I
Master.
can see that now.
Absolutely,
Actually, Now that I was wondering why you were recommending it specifically, and I get it now. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm going to recommend, for more of the tone discussion at least, I'm going to recommend my Forge era game is going to be Dogs in the Vineyard. No longer available, sadly. But like My Life with Master, it's a Forge era masterpiece. The reason why I'm recommending it, and really any of Vincent's games, it doesn't even have to be this one, Vincent Baker knows how to use text to convey tone, to convey all kinds of things, to convey the setting, to convey the characters, but also to convey the tone of how this game is meant to go and how it's meant to feel at the table. And boy, oh boy, Dogs in the Vineyard is a great example of it. Like, you read that text and you are immediately put into the feeling of wide open vistas. You are put into the feeling of a simple life, but a complex belief. You are put into the feeling of watering the horses and kissing the babies and thinking about home and repairing your coat. There is a vibe you get when you read that book, and the text draws you in. And I know this because the book only has like 3 illustrations and it's like 100 plus pages, but it paints a picture, and a part of that is this like really particular tone that it sets of wide open spaces, of gentleness, occasionally punctured by violence. Like, I don't know, it just gets it. I think Apocalypse World is also a good shout here. Yeah. Your mileage may vary on this. It's famously a hard text, but I think the difficulty of the text actually does do a lot of work in conveying a really particular tone and what Apocalypse World is like. But all Vincent's games to some degree or another do this. Melandros is great, incidentally. There are lots of books out there like that do a really good job with conveying different nuanced vibes. I'm also recommend Crown of Salt. This is a OSR module, I think it was from Morkborg, written originally in Spanish, translated to English by Tanya Herrero. We're actually going to be covering this on the show soon, probably next episode, but I do want to give it a shout here because it is a masterclass in tone writing. Oh my God. We probably should have saved this segment for that episode, to be honest. From the jump, you are in the vibes of Crown of Salt, but Tanya knows when to break away from that. It is superbly done. When you're meant to be in it, you're in it. And when you're meant to be out of it, learning the monster stats, you're out of it. And it's all handled so beautifully. And it's really, really great for that. We have films.
Yeah, we have films. What's my film? My film is 1986's Haunted Honeymoon.
Good shout.
Have you seen this? I'm surprised. This is not a well-known... okay. Starring Gene Wilder and Gilda Radner, and not well received at the time, though. It was a box office bomb.
No.
And Dom DeLuise received the Razzie for Worst Supporting Actress for his portrayal of the elderly aunt, which is, I think, a shame. There's some very silly... When I was a kid, this made me laugh until I couldn't breathe, I think. But I do admit...
It's so camp. It's so camp, yeah.
Its plot is a mess... Almost from the off, I will say that is true. And you may find the ending kind of annoying, which I did when I was a kid. But for the Claus Manor style, it's set in a big rambling manor house. Gene Wilder is an actor who's on the verge of a nervous breakdown, but is returning to his family estate in order to get married. And there's a sort of a plot is that they're trying to scare him so much he'll stop having a nervous breakdown, I think is the idea. Right. And there's like a werewolf and some random local investigating cops and all kinds of shenanigans. And man, what a movie. But I think it's for this. I was about to say structure. It doesn't have a structure, but for the lots of things happening at little set pieces in different rooms, it's check it out and don't blame me.
There's like a million upstairs downstairs things to recommend, and we've talked about a bunch of them already, so I'm not going to bother with it. So instead I'm going to recommend Rare Exports, which is a Finnish film from I think I don't remember the year off the top of my head. I want to say it's like 2010 or something like that. Remember Rare Exports?
What's this one about?
I'm trying not to spoil it. It's a Christmas movie, so that's kind of broadly speaking why I'm recommending it.
Now. Yes, okay, go on.
There's actually a really specific reason why I'm recommending it that will spoil the movie, and so I'm not going to say. But it's a Finnish film about a little boy who finds Santa Claus, I guess, like frozen in a block of ice. That's essentially it. It's a very light horror movie. I'd say it's actually closer to like sort of Kids on Bikes style horror movie, kind of mystery horror, but great watch. I watch it every Christmas now. I think I watched it every Christmas since it came out. I love it. It's a treat. Yeah, it's really, really good. Listeners, that is our show. Fear of a Black Dragon is a production of The Gauntlet. You can find us on gauntlet-rpg.com. We're on Blue Sky at Gauntlet RPG, and you can support Fear of a Black Dragon on Patreon by going to patreon.com/gauntlet. Tom, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks as ever to our intercalary editor, Rich Rogers. And thank you, listeners, for listening. Goodbye.
Take care.